The day began like any other in the small rural town, where dusty streets carried the scent of dry soil and early morning breeze. People moved about slowly, opening their shops, sweeping the ground in front of their doors, or preparing for another long day. But in the middle of that ordinary morning, something unusual was happening near the old marketplace. A group of men had surrounded a young boy, and the sound of their harsh voices was drawing attention. The boy's name was Samir. He looked around 12 or 13, thin as if he hadn't eaten properly in days, with hair falling unevenly around his face. His clothes were worn out, the kind that showed the hard life he had lived. Samir stood still, his eyes wide with fear, though he tried not to show it. He had learned long ago that showing fear often made things worse. The men around him kept pulling his arm, pushing his shoulder, and speaking about him as if he wasn't even there. The people watching whispered among themselves. Some felt sorry, but most simply stood by, unsure of what to do. In that town, people had become used to minding their own business. They all knew about Samir. He was the boy who lived on the outskirts, surviving mostly alone after losing everything at a young age. Some called him strange because he didn't talk much. Some called him unpredictable because he defended himself when threatened. And many, without even understanding him, had begun calling him the word that hurt him the most: savage. It was a name that made him feel small, unwanted, and misunderstood. While the men argued, a woman named Aisha was walking past the marketplace. She carried a small bag of groceries and was planning to return home quickly before the sun became too strong. Aisha was known in the town for her gentle behavior. She spoke softly, listened carefully, and always tried to help anyone in need. She was not loud or powerful, but she had a rare kind of quiet strength. As she neared the marketplace, she heard raised voices. Her steps slowed, and when she saw the scene unfolding, she felt her heart tighten. There was something deeply unsettling about seeing a child surrounded by adults who showed no kindness on their faces. Samir's frightened expression tore through her. She didn't know him well, but she had seen him a few times wandering near the edges of the town, collecting things to sell or searching for food. She had always wondered about his story. One of the men shouted at him again, calling him that cruel word. Samir flinched slightly, but stayed silent. Another man lifted his hand, not to strike, but in a threatening gesture. That was the moment Aisha's body reacted before her mind could think. She stepped forward, dropping the bag she was holding, and her voice rose with more firmness than she believed she possessed. "Don't hurt him," she said loudly, her tone cutting through the noise. Everyone turned toward her. The men looked confused, surprised that someone had dared to intervene. Aisha walked closer, placing herself between them and the boy. Samir stared at her, eyes filled with a mixture of confusion and disbelief. Nobody had ever stood up for him like that. The man closest to her frowned and said, "This boy is trouble. He doesn't listen to anyone. We're trying to control him before he causes harm." Aisha shook her head gently. "He's just a child," she replied, "and fear is not the way to help him." The men exchanged glances. One of them, who seemed to be the leader, smirked a little. "If you think he's worth something, then take him. Otherwise, don't interfere." Aisha did not plan to say what came next. It simply rose from her heart, without hesitation or calculation. She looked at Samir, then at the men, and said clearly, "Fine. I'll buy him." The marketplace fell silent. Even people who had only been passing by stopped in shock. Aisha felt her own heart pounding at the boldness of her words, but she did not back down. She repeated calmly, "I'll pay you what you want, but you will not hurt him again." The men were surprised by her sudden firmness. They whispered among themselves, discussing whether she was serious or joking. But when Aisha pulled out the money she had saved for the month, they realized she meant every word. The leader shrugged and said, "If you want him, then take him. He's your responsibility now." Aisha counted the money quietly, handed it over, and then slowly reached out her hand toward Samir. Her gesture was gentle, not forceful. Samir hesitated, He had lived too long without anyone protecting him, without anyone being gentle. But something in her eyes calmed him. She didn't look at him like he was a problem or a burden. She looked at him like he mattered. And so, with a trembling hand, Samir placed his small fingers into hers. Aisha picked up her bag with her other hand and began walking away, guiding him with slow steps. The people around watched them go, whispering, questioning, trying to understand why she had done what she did. But Aisha didn't look back. She didn't need the approval of others. All she cared about was that the frightened child beside her was safe. Samir walked quietly, unsure of what was happening. The feeling of someone holding his hand felt foreign. His steps were unsure, and his breathing was unsteady. Aisha noticed his fear and loosened her grip just enough to let him feel free, yet supported. "You're safe now," she said softly as they walked. Samir didn't reply. He wasn't used to speaking much. Words were strange to him. But he listened carefully to her tone, and it soothed something inside him. When they reached her home, a simple but warm place with clean walls and a small garden, Aisha opened the door and let him enter first. He stepped inside slowly, looking around with wide eyes. The place felt peaceful in a way he had never experienced. Aisha set her bag on the table and turned to him. "You don't have to be afraid," she said. "This is your home now. If you choose to stay." Samir didn't know what to say. He wasn't sure if he should sit, stand, or run. But Aisha didn't push him. She offered him water, then food. She gave him space to breathe. She didn't question him or expect him to talk right away. She simply allowed him to feel safe. That evening, as the sun set outside the window, Aisha watched him sitting in a corner of the room, quietly eating. His movements were shy, unsure, but she could see a tiny spark of relief forming in his eyes. He looked around the room again, trying to understand what this new life meant. In that moment, Aisha understood something clearly. She hadn't just given him protection for a day. She had given him a chance at a whole new life. And Samir, though he didn't know it yet, had taken his first step toward the future that would change him forever. The first night in Aisha's home was unlike anything Samir had ever experienced. The house was quiet, gentle, and carried the scent of freshly cooked food. Samir sat near the corner of the small living room, unsure of what to do next. Every sound felt new to him: the ticking of the old wall clock, the hum of the evening breeze passing through the window, and the soft clinking of dishes as Aisha moved around the kitchen. Aisha didn't rush him or ask him too many questions. She understood that the boy needed time. She placed a warm plate of rice and vegetables in front of him and stepped back, allowing him to choose when to eat. Samir looked at the plate as if it was something unfamiliar. He waited for a moment, glancing at her to see if she expected something. But Aisha only smiled gently and said, "Eat slowly, you must be hungry." Samir started eating with small bites. The food was simple but tasted warm and comforting. He hadn't felt this kind of comfort in a long time. Aisha sat a little distance away, not staring at him, but staying near enough so he wouldn't feel alone. She knew that trust wasn't something that appeared instantly. It had to grow, slowly, like a small seed. Later that night, Aisha prepared a soft bedding area for him. It wasn't a separate room, but it was cozy. A clean mattress, a warm blanket, and a pillow that felt almost too soft for him. When she showed it to him, he looked surprised. He had slept on cold floors for so long that he didn't know how to react to something so gentle. "You can sleep here," she said softly. "If you need anything, I'll be nearby." Samir nodded slowly, then sat on the bed, pressing the blanket between his fingers. The softness felt strange. Aisha turned off the main light, leaving only a small lamp glowing softly in the corner. Samir lay down, his breathing uneven. It took him time to relax because a part of him still believed that this peace might disappear suddenly. But as the minutes passed and the house remained calm, he slowly drifted into a deep, peaceful sleep. The next morning, Aisha woke up early. She went to the kitchen to prepare breakfast and glanced toward where Samir slept. He was still curled up in the blanket, sleeping as if he finally felt safe. She smiled quietly, relieved to see him resting. When Samir woke up, he looked around with confusion, as if he expected to find himself somewhere else. But when he saw Aisha sitting nearby with a gentle smile, he remembered everything. She greeted him softly. "Good morning. Did you sleep well?" He didn't answer with words. He simply nodded. Aisha didn't mind. She wasn't expecting conversations right away. She knew that silence was not a sign of disrespect. It was a sign of fear, slowly melting. As the days passed, Samir began to adjust to his new environment. It wasn't easy. He often avoided eye contact, kept his distance, and got startled by sudden sounds. Sometimes he looked unsure about touching things, almost scared he might break something or get in trouble. Aisha noticed everything, but she never scolded him. Instead, she quietly guided him through small tasks, washing his hands before meals, helping set the table, folding the blanket in the morning. One afternoon, Aisha showed him a small garden behind the house. The sunlight fell softly on the green plants and colorful flowers. Samir stared at the garden with wide eyes. He reached out to touch a leaf, gently sliding his fingers over it. "You can help me water the plants," Aisha suggested, handing him a small watering can. Samir hesitated but held it carefully. As he poured the water over the plants, a small smile appeared on his face, a real one, not forced. Aisha didn't say anything, but she noticed it. That smile was a sign of hope. However, life wasn't instantly perfect. Samir carried years of fear and pain that didn't disappear overnight. There were moments when he panicked for no clear reason. Sometimes he dropped things accidentally and immediately stepped back, as if expecting someone to shout. Aisha always reassured him gently. "It's okay. Mistakes happen. You're not in trouble." Slowly, he began to believe her. Neighbors, on the other hand, weren't always kind. Some people in the town whispered about Aisha's decision, saying she had made a mistake by bringing Samir into her home. They spoke with judgment in their voices, calling him the same name that had hurt him for years. But Aisha ignored them. She knew that people often feared what they didn't understand. One day, while Aisha and Samir were walking through the marketplace, a woman nearby murmured, "Why did she bring that boy home? He's not like other children." Samir lowered his eyes instantly. His hands trembled lightly. The old fear started creeping back into him. Aisha noticed. She placed her hand gently on his shoulder and said calmly, "Don't worry about what people say. You're safe with me." Her voice was steady, filled with kindness, and somehow it helped Samir breathe again. Back at home, Aisha introduced simple routines to help him feel more grounded. She taught him how to sweep the floor gently, how to fold clothes, how to open and close doors without fear. She encouraged him to sit at the table instead of hiding in corners. Every small step he took, she appreciated it like it was something big. One evening, while watching him try to read a label on a box, she realized something important. Samir didn't know how to read. She didn't mention it to him immediately, not wanting him to feel embarrassed. Instead, she started teaching him small words, writing them on paper, repeating them gently until he could recognize them. At first, he struggled. He often mixed up letters, and his voice shook when he tried to say the words, but every time he managed to read even a tiny word correctly, Aisha celebrated it like a victory. And that made him try harder the next time. Samir also struggled with emotions. There were moments when he felt overwhelmed and didn't know how to express himself. When that happened, he would sit outside in the garden, staring at the plants he now helped care for. Aisha would sit beside him, not asking questions, just offering silent support. Over time, this silence became a language they both understood. One night, when a loud thunderstorm hit the town, Samir woke up suddenly, frightened by the sound. Before fear could take over, Aisha came into the room with a calm expression and sat beside him. "It's just thunder," she said softly. "You're safe here." She didn't leave until he fell asleep again. Slowly, Samir began to understand something he had never known before: what safety felt like. He started helping Aisha in the kitchen, learning how to wash vegetables or mix simple ingredients. He began eating at the table with her instead of sitting in a corner. He even started forming small sentences when necessary, surprising himself with the sound of his own voice. Aisha never rushed him. She celebrated each small improvement with quiet pride. She knew that healing was not a race. It was a journey. As the days turned into weeks, Samir became more comfortable. The house no longer felt unfamiliar. The garden felt like a peaceful space meant for him. The routines made him feel stable, and Aisha, she wasn't just someone who rescued him. She had become the person he trusted the most. He still didn't speak much, but the silence between them was no longer fearful. It was gentle, meaningful. Slowly, he began to realize that Aisha wasn't going to leave him or give up on him. She cared in ways he had never imagined someone could care. And deep inside, a new feeling started growing, the beginning of trust, something he had once thought he would never feel again. As the weeks turned into months, Samir found himself slowly adjusting to the rhythm of Aisha's home. It was a gentle, steady life, filled with small routines that brought him comfort. Yet inside him, the journey was not simple. Old memories did not disappear easily. They stayed in the corners of his mind, appearing unexpectedly, and making ordinary things feel difficult at times. But Aisha never rushed him. She understood that healing was a long path, and every step mattered. One morning, Aisha found him sitting on the edge of his bedding, his shoulders tense. He seemed troubled. She approached quietly, not wanting to startle him, and asked softly, "Did you sleep well?" He didn't answer with words but gave a small nod. Aisha didn't push further. She knew that silence sometimes carried more meaning than long explanations. Instead, she handed him a warm cup of milk and waited for him to relax. Later that day, she asked him to help her in the garden. Samir followed her quietly, the morning sun creating soft shadows around them. As he watered the plants, she noticed his hands trembling slightly, even though he tried to hide it. She realized something was bothering him. "You don't have to talk if you don't want to," she said gently, kneeling beside the flower bed. "But remember, you're not alone anymore." Samir paused, water dripping from the edge of the small can he held. He lowered it slowly and looked at the ground. His voice came out barely above a whisper. But to Aisha, it was the most important sound of the day. "I don't know how to be like other people." Aisha looked at him kindly. "You don't have to be like anyone else. You just have to be yourself." These simple words stayed with him for days. He repeated them quietly to himself whenever he felt overwhelmed. He had never heard anything like that in his life. Most people had only pointed out what was wrong with him, not what was right. Aisha continued teaching him small things. Reading simple words was still difficult for him, but he kept trying. Sometimes he mixed up letters. Sometimes he forgot the sound of a word. When he struggled, he grew silent, almost expecting disappointment. But Aisha never showed frustration. She would simply encourage him to try again. One afternoon, she sat with him at the table with a notebook and pencil. "Let's write your name," she said, smiling. Samir hesitated as if the task was too big, but he held the pencil with shaky fingers and tried. The letters were uneven, and his hand wobbled. But when he finally finished writing, "Samir," he stared at it with quiet amazement. Aisha clapped softly. "See? You did it." A small spark lit up in his eyes. Not a smile, but something very close to it, pride. There were days, however, when his old fears came back strongly. Sometimes a loud noise outside would make him jump. Sometimes he would drop something accidentally and freeze, expecting anger from someone. Aisha always reassured him, "It's okay. You're safe. No one is upset." Her calmness slowly dissolved the fear inside him, like sunlight melting away morning fog. One day at the marketplace, Aisha took him along to buy vegetables. His steps were unsteady, and he stayed very close to her. He still remembered the hurtful words people used to say about him, and he feared hearing them again. And just as he feared, a group of men nearby whispered when they saw him. "That boy again. The same one they called Savage," one of them muttered. Samir stiffened immediately. His body froze like a statue. The memories rushed back, filling him with an old panic he thought he had escaped. He lowered his eyes, his breathing shallow. Aisha noticed immediately and turned to the men with calm but firm eyes. "You can call him whatever you want," she said in a steady voice. "I know who he truly is." Those simple words were like a shield placed gently around him. The men fell silent. Samir's eyes slowly lifted to her. He didn't say anything, but something inside him softened in a way he couldn't describe. It was the first time someone had defended him publicly, not with anger, but with quiet strength. As they walked home, Samir stayed close beside her. But there was a different kind of closeness this time, one built from gratitude, not fear. Back at home, Aisha could see that the incident had shaken him, so she didn't ask him to help with any chores that day. Instead, she gave him a soft blanket, invited him to sit near the window, and placed a book beside him. He couldn't read most of it, but he liked looking at the pictures. After a while, he spoke in a low voice, surprising her. "Why did you say that, in the market?" Aisha looked at him gently. "Because you're not what they say, and you never were." Samir stared at the floor. "But I don't know how to talk like others. I don't understand many things. Learning takes time," she replied softly. "You've survived a lot. But now, you're learning to live. And I'm here with you." Those words wrapped around him like warm sunlight. Over the next few weeks, Aisha slowly gave him responsibilities. She asked him to help fold clothes, arrange dishes on the table, read simple labels on jars, and carry small bags from the market. These simple tasks might have seemed ordinary to others, but for Samir, they were steps toward feeling capable and accepted. Every time he successfully completed a task, Aisha acknowledged it with gentle appreciation. She never exaggerated. Her praise was always simple and sincere. "Good job, thank you," or "You did that very well." Her trust made Samir want to do better. In the evenings, he began sitting with her in the garden without being asked. They didn't always talk. Sometimes they simply watched the sky change colors or listened to birds settling on the trees. That quiet companionship became one of the most peaceful parts of his day. But one evening, Samir had a difficult moment. He accidentally knocked over a glass bowl in the kitchen. It fell to the floor and shattered. The sound was loud, sharp. Samir froze instantly, his heart pounding. He stepped back quickly and pressed himself against the wall, his breathing fast and fearful. Aisha walked into the kitchen, saw the broken pieces, and understood immediately what he was feeling. She approached slowly, speaking in a calm, steady tone. "It's okay, Samir. It's just a bowl. Nothing more." Samir looked at her with wide, fearful eyes, waiting for anger that never came. Aisha smiled gently. "We can clean it together. Nothing is wrong." She handed him a dustpan and showed him how to gather the pieces safely. His hands shook, but he tried. When they finished cleaning, she looked at him and said, "See? It's not a big problem. Sometimes things break. That happens in every home." This moment became another turning point. Samir realized that mistakes didn't mean he would be rejected. They were simply a part of life. A few days later, he surprised Aisha by speaking more openly. While helping her in the garden, he said, "I want to learn more. I want to understand things like other people do." Aisha smiled, her heart warming. "And you will. We'll take it one step at a time." She started teaching him every day, reading, writing, simple manners, expressions, how to understand feelings, and how to speak confidently. Some days he improved quickly. Other days he struggled, but no matter how slow the progress, Aisha remained patient, guiding him gently. Samir began noticing changes within himself. He no longer woke up, frightened. He no longer hid in corners. He started initiating small conversations, sometimes even smiling without realizing it. The house felt like a real home to him, a place where he belonged. He also started noticing Aisha in a deeper way. He saw how hard she worked to keep the home running. He noticed her kindness in the simplest things, the way she poured tea, the way she organized the books, the way she remembered his small habits. He wanted to help her more. Not out of obligation, but out of gratitude. Every day he grew quieter inside. Not the silence of fear, but the silence of peace. And slowly, a new feeling began growing in him. Stronger than fear, stronger than doubt. The feeling that he was capable of becoming someone better. He wasn't the frightened boy from before. He wasn't the lonely child abandoned by the world. He was someone learning to stand, someone learning to grow, someone beginning to believe in himself. And Aisha was the reason behind that transformation. Months had passed since the day Aisha brought Samir home, and the quiet transformation inside him had grown into something even stronger. The boy who once hid from every sound, who trembled at every mistake, now walked through the house with soft confidence. He still spoke less than most children his age, but when he did speak, his words were steady and clear. His eyes no longer carried the same deep fear. Instead, they showed a gentle curiosity about the world around him. Yet, despite all this growth, Samir still faced moments of doubt. Sometimes, he wondered if he truly belonged in this life full of warmth. Sometimes, he questioned if he deserved kindness. Those old feelings didn't vanish easily. But whenever he felt unsure, Aisha was there with her calm reassurance, reminding him with her actions that he mattered. One bright morning, Aisha told him they would visit a nearby town for supplies. Samir felt nervous at the idea of traveling somewhere new, but he nodded. He trusted Aisha deeply, and being with her made unfamiliar places feel safe. When they reached the town, Samir was amazed. The streets were wider, the shops larger, and the noise louder than what he was used to. People moved busily from one place to another. Aisha held his hand lightly, guiding him through the crowds without letting him feel overwhelmed. She pointed out different shops, explained the things she needed to buy, and every now and then asked him to help carry something small. As they passed by a street, they noticed a small school building. Children were gathered outside, laughing, talking, and running around. Samir froze as he watched them. He had never been to a school. He didn't even know what it felt like to sit in a classroom or learn with others. A shy longing flashed in his eyes, mixed with fear. He wondered if he could ever fit into a place like that. Aisha looked at him gently. "Would you like to study someday?" Samir hesitated. The idea scared him. What if he couldn't keep up? What if others laughed at him? He lowered his head. "I don't know," he whispered. Aisha placed a hand on his shoulder. "You don't need to decide now. When you're ready, we'll try, and I'll be with you." That simple promise settled softly inside him. Later, as they continued walking, Samir noticed a small bookstore. He stopped in front of it, drawn by something he couldn't explain. Through the window, he saw shelves filled with books of all sizes. Aisha saw the look in his eyes and smiled. "Do you want to go inside?" she asked. He looked uncertain. "Can I?" "Of course," she replied with warmth. They stepped inside, and the smell of paper filled the air. Samir moved slowly between the shelves, his fingers brushing over the covers. He didn't know how to read most of the words, but he felt a quiet excitement. Aisha picked a simple picture book and handed it to him. "This one is for beginners," she said. "We can read it together." Samir held the book gently, almost like he was afraid it might disappear. That simple book became one of his most treasured belongings. When they returned home, Samir asked if they could start reading right away. Aisha smiled and sat with him, guiding him through the words with patience. Every time he mispronounced a word, she calmly corrected him. Every time he succeeded, she appreciated his effort. Day by day, they kept reading, and slowly, more words began making sense to him. As time passed, Samir grew more confident in helping Aisha around the house. He washed vegetables, swept the floor, helped clean the garden, and even learned how to prepare simple meals. Aisha trusted him with more tasks, and that trust gave him pride. He wanted to support her the way she supported him. One evening, after finishing dinner, Aisha asked him to sit with her in the garden. The sky was painted with soft orange and purple shades, and the air carried a peaceful stillness. Samir sat beside her quietly, waiting. Do you know how much you've changed? Aisha asked gently. Samir looked down, unsure how to respond. You're calmer, she continued. You're learning fast. You're becoming stronger every day. I'm proud of you. Samir swallowed tightly. He wasn't used to compliments. They made his heart feel full in a way he didn't know how to handle. You helped me, he whispered. You made it happen. Aisha smiled. I only guided you. You did the real work. Her words stayed with him, but life still had challenges. One afternoon, while Aisha was away visiting a neighbor, Samir heard loud knocking at the door. The sudden noise startled him. His old fears rushed back, and his heart beat fast. The knocking grew louder. Samir hesitated, unsure whether to open the door or stay silent. Finally, gathering his courage, he opened it slightly and saw one of the men who had once mocked him in the marketplace. The man stared at him for a moment, surprised to see him there. Samir felt the old panic rising, but he held onto the door for support. I came to speak with Aisha, the man said gruffly. She's not here, Samir managed to say, his voice shaking slightly. The man nodded and, to Samir's surprise, didn't say anything rude. He simply replied, Tell her I'll come again later, and left. Samir closed the door, breathing heavily but relieved. When Aisha returned and heard what happened, she was deeply impressed. You handled it very well, she said sincerely. You see how strong you've become? Samir didn't feel strong, but hearing her say it made something inside him grow. Days continued passing gently. Samir learned more words, more skills, and more ways to express his feelings. He didn't hide as much. He stood straighter, walked taller, and smiled more often. He even began asking small questions about the world, about plants, about the things he didn't understand. One day, he asked Aisha, Why did you help me that day, when no one else did? Aisha paused and thought carefully. Because I saw someone who needed kindness. And because everyone deserves a chance, especially someone who was never given one. Samir lowered his eyes. But why me? Because, she said softly, I knew you had goodness inside you. And I was right. That simple answer touched him deeply. A few weeks later, something special happened. Aisha handed him a new book, one with simple stories and colorful pages. This is for you, she said. Me? Samir asked in disbelief. Yes, you've worked hard. You deserve it. He held the book like a treasure. It was the first time he had ever been given something meant only for him. He spent hours reading it with Aisha, stumbling over words but trying with full effort. Every page he understood brought him joy. Slowly, a feeling began to form inside him, the desire to become someone who could help others the way Aisha helped him. He didn't know how he would achieve it. But the dream started growing quietly. Seasons changed. The garden bloomed, then softened with cooler winds. Samir's heart also bloomed in its own slow, gentle way. One evening, as they finished dinner, Samir spoke softly. Aisha, thank you. For what? She asked, surprised. For everything, he replied. For saving me. For teaching me. For not giving up. Aisha reached out and placed her hand over his. I didn't save you, Samir. You saved yourself. I just helped you see your strength. He looked into her eyes, and for the first time, he understood what she meant. He wasn't the boy from the marketplace anymore. He wasn't the frightened child hiding from the world. He was someone learning to live, someone growing, someone capable of love and kindness. He whispered, I want to be good. Like you. Aisha smiled warmly. You already are. The stars shone above them, casting a soft glow over the garden. The night was calm, peaceful. The kind of peace Samir never thought he would feel in his life. He realized something important that night. He was no longer defined by what others had called him. He was no longer savage, no longer lost, no longer alone. He had found a home. He had found guidance. He had found a future. And most importantly, he had found himself.